Dear participants, welcome to the afternoon session of Day1. This symposium is intended as a starting point to promote action and reflection on social justice in a digital age, in civil society, in action groups, in the ecumenical fellowships, in faith communities. One of the tools for this is a manifesto and program for action to be developed through a collaborative process involving symposium participants. To set the scene, the General Secretary of the World Association for Christian Communication, Philip Lee, will set the scene by setting out the context and the process that has led to the symposium. Philip Lee has been WACC's General Secretary since 2018, but has been with the organization since 1975 and brings his in-depth knowledge and experience of communication right to our dialogue. He is also the editor of the international journal Media Development. Philip Lee, you have the microphone.
Good afternoon. The presentations this morning by Dr. Ellen Überschar and Bishop Heinrich Bedford-Strom have given us a number of key words that echo earlier struggles around what we might call the democratization of communication. These words are accessibility, affordability, ownership and control, inclusion, exclusion, and human dignity. Now, the echo comes from the 1970s. The 1970s saw the convergence of a number of movements aimed at political, economic, social, and cultural change. We remember, for example, the struggle against apartheid in South Africa, and other movements for self-determination. But there was also another struggle around freedom of expression and news flows between North and South, East and West. And one of the examples given was that if you wanted to hear news about what was going on in Dakar, in Senegal, you had to go to Paris first and get it and then go back. So the news flows were uneven and unfairly distributed in many kinds of ways. And collectively, these different movements and calls led to something that was labeled the New World Information and Communication Order, or NUICO. And this is not about the technique or the technology of communication, but how communication and the media shape society. In the 1980s, the World Association for Christian Communication, WACC, and the World Council of Churches, WCC, explored the issue of what credible communication might mean. And of course, some of the topics that came up even then are ones that you readily recognize today around fake news, disinformation, ownership and control. 1983 saw the internet. 1990, the World Wide Web. Technologies that we're now very familiar with and have led us into what we are calling the digital age. And here, also in the 1980s and 1990s, there emerged a new field called communication rights. This was about freedom of opinion and expression, but more than that, freedom of the press, freedom of information, language rights, privacy, and again, media ownership and control. So today it seems to me that we've come full circle between the 1970s and the 2020s. We see the same issues of inclusion and exclusion at play in the digital age. Next slide, please. And there are others. Net neutrality now, surveillance, data privacy, artificial intelligence. A broad definition of communication rights would be something that WAC endorses, and I think many other civil society organizations. Communication rights enable all people everywhere to express themselves individually and collectively in order to improve their own and others' lives. Next slide, please. Thank you. So the challenge that faces societies everywhere and the ecumenical movement today is how to achieve greater social inclusion and how to bring about what we call digital justice. The way forward from this 3-day event will partly be a manifesto and an action plan that we hope we can all undertake together. And to introduce that process and what we have in mind, I'd like to call on Dr. Stephen Brown, who is part of the communications team of the World Council of Churches, and he's regional president for Europe of WACC. Stephen, thank you.
Thank you, Philip. First slide, please. Thank you, Philip. Philip, you mentioned that the purpose of this symposium is to look towards the future. And one way that we want to try and do this in our 3 days together is by working towards a manifesto for social justice in a digital age as a collaborative venture. This is a digital experiment, and we will see how it works out. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. So why are we talking about a manifesto? One of the reasons is that we didn't want to talk about a final statement or a closing message, because that would give the idea that everything that needed to be discussed has been discussed, and we'd come up with the answers and the proposals. Rather, what we want to do is to develop a manifesto that looks forward, that can highlight the challenges and make proposals for action, that's an initiative to listen to and work with civil society, action groups, the ecumenical movement, and faith communities. Philip mentioned how the World Council of Churches and the World Association for Christian Communication have a long history in working together on communication rights. And we hope this symposium and the manifesto can also be among the building blocks that will feed into the next assembly of the World Council of Churches that will take place in Germany in 2022, as several of this morning's speakers have already mentioned. And the issue of the digital technological revolution has already been identified as one of the key challenges that the Assembly needs to deal with. Next slide, please. As I mentioned, we hope that we can find a collaborative process in which all participants at this symposium can contribute ideas and proposals. Participants should have received in your email boxes a few minutes ago the draft manifesto, which was drawn up by a small preparatory group in 4 languages: English, French, German, and Spanish. I want to underline that this is a draft manifesto. It can and should be added to and changed in the light of our discussions, even quite significantly. It currently has an opening section based around contexts and challenges, principles to promote justice in a digital age, and the need for us to have a transformative movement. It's then followed by a space for proposals for actions based around the focus for each of the 3 days: promoting digital justice, expanding public space, creating visions for the future. In a minute, I will go through the text, and you will see that there are bullet points without any text next to them. This doesn't mean that this is the only place where participants can contribute, but it's intended to underline this as a draft, a framework that needs the input of the symposium as a whole. Next slide, please. So there are various ways for input from the symposium into the draft manifesto. First of all, there are the breakout groups and the regional meetings. And at the end of this session, we will outline how the breakout groups that follow this session will be able to contribute to the manifesto. The idea is to highlight key issues from the day's discussions, to highlight issues that have not been included, that should be included, or maybe there are things that don't need to be in the manifesto and maybe need to have a different focus. There are also regional meetings taking place for North America, Latin America, and the Caribbean, with interpretation in French, Spanish, and English, and for the region of Asia and the Pacific, which are also invited to share proposals and ideas. Third, there is a rapporteur for each day who is following the discussions and identifying key issues for the manifesto. And in a minute, I'll invite Dr. Erin Green, who is one of the rapporteurs and was one of the respondents to Bishop Heinrich Bedford Strome this morning, to say a little bit more about the work of the rapporteurs. And fourthly, we have the opportunity of an open source collaborative online editor, Etherpad, where all participants can make direct input, comments, ideas on the draft manifesto. And we need your comments, your ideas, your input, because the manifesto is not intended to be the work of a small drafting committee, but something that really represents the input and ideas and proposals of participants at the symposium. We have links to the manifesto in English, French, German, and Spanish, and on the Etherpad you will find instructions on how to make comments, suggestions, to add text, to change text, to bring in new ideas. And we'll share the address for the Etherpad, which you've also received in your email a few minutes ago, on the next slide. A small group with the rapporteurs will consolidate all the input and the proposals that we have got until Tuesday evening, and on Wednesday afternoon we will share the latest version of the manifesto. Again, this is not a final document, the symposium hasn't finished, but it's an opportunity collectively to take stock of where we've got to and see collectively together if there are other issues that need to be highlighted or issues that need to be strengthened. Following the symposium, we will continue work on the manifesto and hope to share a further draft at the beginning of next week with ideas about how we can take the process further. The idea is that the manifesto shouldn't be the end of the process, but should be the beginning to develop contacts and common actions and advocacy in civil society, with the ecumenical community, and with faith communities. So you will see on the current slide the address to Etherpad, where you can make your collective suggestions online for the manifesto, and we look forward to having many suggestions and many proposals. I'd now like to switch to the draft text that you have received in your email boxes. Okay, so this is the draft manifesto. You'll see as we move through the text that it starts with the background to the manifesto and how we want to work with it. We've then started with a quotation from a paper that was produced at the beginning of this year as a reflection on the theme of the World Council of Churches Assembly in 2022. As I said, this is where the digital technological revolution is highlighted as a significant issue for the Assembly to deal with. Right. We then have organised the manifesto around context and challenges. Where you can see already that there are some bullet points without text next to them, and that's intended to show that this is really a preliminary document where we want and where we need input. We then move on to principles to promote communication for social justice in a digital age. And then talk a bit about how we need to have a transformative movement to effect change. And then the final section is just highlighted as a framework around the themes of the 3 days of our discussions together. This is a framework, it's not a final document, it's not intended to be a final document, but it's intended to be a framework where we can contribute our ideas, our inputs, our visions, how we see working together to promote social justice in a digital age. Thank you, and I would now like to pass the floor to Erin Green to say a bit about the work of the rapporteur.
Thank you, Stephen, and thank you everyone and online friends who continue to stay with us. So Stephen did an excellent job of outlining the job of the rapporteurs and the hope and expectation behind the statement process. So a little bit more about what the rapporteurs are doing. Our job is in some ways very straightforward, but also quite difficult and challenging. So we need to listen, but we need to listen carefully, and we need to listen trying to see and hear and feel through the eyes and ears and experiences of everyone that is joining us, whom we can't see and who are separated from us in Zoom. So we really do need to hear as much as possible from our friends who are not with us in Berlin. And we have outlined the ways that you can connect with us. And it's really important to hear from you because we can use our imaginations and we can draw on our own experiences, but the pathway through to justice and to reflect that in the statement is in accurate representation of the diversity in the body of Christ. And so we really do need to hear from you. Don't feel shy, don't feel intimidated. All questions are welcome. All sharing of experiences is welcome. Everyone has something they can bring to the table in this process. And we really do want this to be a global process. You can hear it in the names of the organizations that have come and brought this symposium together. The word world is in the name of the organizations. So it's embedded in the identity that this is really a global statement, and we take that to heart. So please don't be shy, and we look forward to hearing more from you.
Thank you very much. Now it is a question if the participants have some questions, some informations, or some comments with regards to what we have just read, we've just heard concerning the manifesto. You can use their chat to communicate with us. Thanks.
Seems there are no questions. Nick? Oh, okay. There is one question. Who will finish the draft after the symposium? Could you answer this, Stephen?
Yes, at the moment we've got a small working group of the rapporteur and representatives from the different sponsoring organisations, from the World Council of Churches, from WAC, from Evangelische Mission Weltweit, EMW. And one of the things that we will be looking at later after the symposium, when we look at the results of the discussions and the input, we will then see what next steps are needed to arrive at a final document. So we hope to be in contact with participants by email, and maybe there will be some developments in how we expand the group that will finalise the document. At the moment, it's the rapporteur and representatives of 3 of the organising organisations.
Thank you very much. There is another question. How can it work to include people from the margins?
We hope that people who are at this symposium will be able to make proposals and input, but I think the important thing to say is that the manifesto we've talked about is not intended as an end document in itself, but it's intended as a starting point. And we hope that through our organisations, one of my responsibilities is working with the World Association for Christian Communication, and there we have contacts with grassroots groups working on communication rights around the world at the very local level. And we hope that one of the things that we can do with the manifesto is to share with them, get input from our partners, and develop a manifesto 2.0. If this will be manifesto 1.0, then would work to manifesto 2.0. So we hope that what we're talking about is not a document, but a process. And I think all of the organisations involved in organising the symposium have contacts with organisations working at grassroots levels, and we hope that with our partnerships we can be able to get wider input than from simply the people at the symposium.
There is a comment. Manifestos are usually the articulation of ideals. Should there be a section of finance and resource mobilization for the ideas and recommendations?
I think we're open to everything. We thought of the manifesto as being listing ideals, ideas, principles, but we also saw very much the need for a section on how we take that further, how we work together, what are the key issues that we need to work around together. So we want to hold together the ideals with the action, and we need your input, people in Berlin, but particularly online participants around the world. We need your input, not only about the ideals and the principles, but also concrete actions that we need to take together in order to promote social justice in the digital age.
The next question. How can we help the poor communities regarding digital justice which are under operative systems?
I think that's a really important question, and I don't think it's one for me to answer. It's one for the symposium as a whole to reflect on, and we really look forward to suggestions and ideas in the manifesto as to how we can work further together on that. it's important to see this as a collaborative effort and as a process to working further together.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
I would like to remind the participants that after the break, we will be working in small groups or small working groups on the manifestos. There are some leading questions and some things that we need to do in each group, and we will be informed about them as we work together in developing or in working on the manifesto again. Before we get there, I can introduce us already to some of the things that we will be doing during our small group sections. We will be selecting a facilitator, and we will be taking concise notes. And these will be the following questions that we will be discussing. What are the key issues from the earlier session that need to be reflected in the manifesto? What issues are not included in the manifesto that need to be there? Are there things that don't need to be there? And we will have to name 3 or 4 actions that arrive from the day's discussions, taking into account the previous discussions that we had that need to be included in the manifesto. So these are the questions we'll be dealing with and actions we'll be taking when we get into our small groups. And we would like to remind you also that we will need to keep our Zoom links open because the organizers, the technicians will have to divide us into the small groups.
See you again at 3 o'clock.
3 o'clock German time. Yes. Thank you. We welcome you all back. We will continue with the program, and I believe that you have had a respite moment during this break. I would now like to invite Dr. Lorenzo Vargas, who is the program manager of the World Association for Christian Communication, to give us an intro to the plenary on good practice and case studies. Mr. Lorenzo Vargas, you have the word.
Thank you very much, Nick. Good morning to all of you who are joining us from the Americas. Good afternoon and good evening to all of you who are in Europe, Africa, and Asia. It's a pleasure for me to be here with all of you. As Nick mentioned, my name is Lorenzo Vargas, and I am program manager with WAC, WACC, as we are also called, the World Association for Christian Communication, one of the co-organizers of this conference. And I'd like to begin by also thanking the other co-organizers, WCC, Bread for the World, EMW, and all the other agencies that are part of this process. This is going to be an hour-long session, if I remember correctly. Might be an hour-long session. And the idea here is to bring some of the ideas that have been talked about during the presentations earlier, like dignity, human rights, digital capitalism, what that might, or surveillance capitalism, I apologize, what all those things might mean in practice for people on the ground, particularly in the Global South, where there's a different set of frameworks, a different set of realities that people have to live with in terms of access to the digital, but also in terms of surveillance, in terms of social justice. So I'll begin briefly by mentioning the work that we at WACC do in support of digital rights. This is an area that's relatively new to us, but I mean, as you all know, we work from the perspective of communication rights. And over the past 5-6 years, as we have begun to see issues around fake news, misinformation, disinformation, the misuse of data, growing surveillance, we have decided to begin working in partnership with organizations in developing countries that are at the forefront of the struggle for digital justice and communication rights in a digital era, really. So today's session will have 3 of those case studies, and they sort of reflect different elements of WAC's program under digital justice. So as of right now, the main 3 focus we have are support for organizations working to engage in digital policy making. As you all know, digital policy is quite complex, and often civil society organizations are excluded from participating in digital policy making. So one of the things we're hoping to do is to push that agenda. The other one is to, of course, advance the notion of digital literacy, particularly from a very critical point of view, to enable people from around the world, but particularly from communities experiencing marginalization, to be able to engage critically with the digital, to understand how the data works, how the ecosystem of digital technology works, and what their role is in it, and how they can, of course, navigate that in a safe and productive way. And the last element of that is the support of digital, locally run community telecommunication companies that are, for example, an indigenous group that is setting up their own telecom company in an area that is not being reached by other areas. Those are often called community networks. So those are the 3 main areas that we work under. And what we will do now is we will have 3 presentations. As I said, the first one will be live, and this is a presentation by Mr. Parminder Singh from IT for Change, who's joining us from India. And as I said, he's going to be live. And afterwards, we'll have 2 sessions from the Philippines and from Palestine. And those 2 will be pre-recorded, but we are lucky enough to have the presenters also present with us today, so they can answer questions after the end of the session. So what I'll do now is I'll pass the ball to Parminder, who's, as I said, joining us from Bangalore in India and works for IT for Change. So Parminder, take it away, please.
Thank you, Lorenzo, and hi to everybody. And I look forward to this extremely important conference. Speaking of my organization, IT for Change, as a case study is a little difficult to do it in the 8 or 10 minutes that I'm allocated. We actually started as an informal network at the start of the millennium, but we started working as a staffed office around 2005. So our earlier years were about what has been called as ICTs for development. We're trying to see if IT could do so many different things, what it could do for development. But what we were doing, apart from the dominant discourse, was that we had a critical take to it. But a critical take not just to say that things cannot be done, but to see whether the change can be brought in a manner which is in keeping with the traditional development ethos. And a lot of IT people, as you would also come across, and there used to be even more so way back then, used to consider IT as this magic bullet and everything changes from now and so on. And then we had these engagements with the World Summit on the Information Society. At that time, WAC, I know, was supporting the communication rights movement. People like Sean Sokru, etc., were also whom we worked with. Going a bit beyond, fast forward, post-World Summit era was the era of internet companies. Google's, Facebook's, and later Twitter were becoming big. And IT for Change engaged at that time a lot in what has been called as internet governance. And I would stop here to also say that IT for Change has this spread right from local to national to global, doing research and advocacy, but also doing projects right at the local level, and also globally linked projects. So we have this 360-degree expanse. We do community radio, but we also were parts of the UN working groups on internet governance. So as Lorenzo talked about, the digital policy that time was known largely as internet or IT policy, and we have been there. The biggest problem or issue in those early eras were, as I said, was that there was this tendency to see IT as something so new that you do not have to have continuities with traditional ethos of whether it was development, whether it was public sphere, whether it was communication rights. And our work largely was to make those connections. And that's where we situated IT for change as. As we went forward, the internet was also thought of as a space which was uniquely to be different from the non-virtual space, as they would call it, and they wanted it largely to be unregulated. And that's where the internet governance talk came in, and we said, no, internet is an arena of freedom, new possibilities, but it also requires new kinds of laws, a new kind of regulations. A lot of these regulations would be national regulations, and so on. And the work during that period, which I would say from 2005 on to about 2012 and 13, was largely around internet governance. And then the later period, which we really call as the digital society, came with the dominance of data and artificial intelligence, which you all hear a lot about. It was at this time that our connections with one thing IT for Change always did was that we tended to become the interpreter for traditional development organizations working in areas like health, education, trade, justice, environment. And we were the ones who were trying to convey the IT possibilities and IT dangers in their language to them. And therefore, these associations were later consolidated into what became the Just Net Coalition, which was formed in 2014. And we have our founding principles, which are known as the Delhi Declaration. Now, Delhi Declaration was quite prescient in talking about many things which are talked about today, like people should own their data, collective of people should own their data, that most of basic digital functionalities should be available as public utilities, something now, for example, the US is even talking about. So these were the things we were talking in 2014. So we had this, the Delhi Declaration, which was the formative principles of Just Net Coalition. And as we moved on, then it became the period of digital economy, data, and intelligence. And it was in 2019 that we together as Just Net Coalition wrote the document called Digital Justice Manifesto. And this Digital Justice Manifesto was less about internet, more about data and intelligence and how data should be controlled, data should be owned, our technostructures and public spaces in the technology side should also be open and free. And as we know that in the area of technology, privatization is the default. If we think technology, we think it is an enclosed corporate space. So our struggles were largely in this direction of making spaces public, and we're needed bringing in regulation. So now quickly in the last 3 or 4 minutes, I would talk about some work we are currently doing with WAC. We have a project which is partly funded by WAC and partly funded by some others, where we have taken forward the work I was talking about earlier of being a kind of interlocutor with other areas of development. And we have set up working groups. Some we have set up, others we are in process of setting up with actors in different areas. They range from gender justice to trade, to finance, media, labor, agriculture, and so on. In each area, we get experts from both sides and they work together, and some of them started work to write landscaping paper and then trying to develop the basic normative principles of that area. And we wish this process which has started as a project, to become an ongoing method in which digital policy is developed not in certain rarefied technicalized areas by certain so-called technical experts, but it is developed from close to the places of impact. And the closest places of impact of digital policies, as we know, is in different sectors. It is in education, it's in health, it is in agriculture, and so on. So these actors, together with those people who work on the horizontal area of digital policy, should work together. And therefore, we have these bilateral systems between digital experts and experts in different technical, different sectors. But once these bilaterals are working together, they would also together come and meet and see what are the common ways data governance should take place, artificial intelligence governance should take place, and platform governance should take place. I can go forward and give you certain examples in areas like, at least in agriculture, health, finance, and governance, where we have worked with Government of India to try to develop certain kind of protocols where open digital structures in those areas can be developed instead of digital monopolies, which we know the digital monopolistic platforms which dominate those areas. So what finally I'm trying to say is that there are probably three areas of digital policy work we have been focusing on. One is public and community ownership of data and artificial intelligence, and India recently brought out a report of which I was also a member of the committee. Second is that as far as possible, the digital value chains should be structurally separate. Therefore, different business lines and technical layers should be managed by different businesses. And third, that there should be a partnership between community public infrastructure on the top of which public private players should act. Therefore, rather than there being one education monopoly and one health monopoly like Apple is turning out to be, there should be certain public platforms and community digital platforms which have open protocols on which different smaller startups can keep on working. So this was a very wide view of the kind of work we do towards the idea of digital justice, which is the subject matter of this conference. Thank you, and I'm happy to take questions from you.
Thank you very much, Parminder. We have about a couple minutes if anybody has any questions now, or maybe let's have one question right now, and we'll save a bit of time for questions at the end. Okay, go ahead, Michael. I see that you have your hand up.
Yeah, hello. Thanks a lot for this presentation. I just wanted to ask the question, how realistic is it if the public comes up with a platform with an open code to compete with the already big market players that have basically occupied the place? Is there, how do you assess the chances that communities or the public can put something against that market weight?
Michael, that's a very important question, almost the central question of digital society, a just digital society and a just digital economy. And I would like to, make you happy to answer in affirmative that not only is it possible, in India, some attempts have started. There are attempts, as I said, in 4 areas. In India, there is a financial platform which is owned by the central bank, and every digital finance application has to interact through that public owned platform. And this has completely changed the dynamics of finance in India. And you guys, I do not know what kind of apps you use, but PayPal, etc. You have directly to be on the PayPal to be able to pay to somebody else in PayPal. There are completely private systems, but India has a public switch and all private systems go through it. You'll be happy to know that India has come up with an India digital ecosystem for agriculture, which is a concept where the consultations are taking place, is again a set of government public platforms, community owned federated platforms with federated data, where all private players, if they have to go through the farmer, would preferably go through this system. So the question which you actually asked me, I'm just interpreting it into actual working conceptual systems. Similar has happened as a concept level in India as a national health interface, which has also come up. And it started to happen in agriculture as well. So this is happening. Those models are coming together. And I think our activists should put in their efforts towards it. And the last point I would like to put here is that we also have to be careful about what power it then gives to the state. And therefore, there should be very good statutory governance arrangements of these platforms, so that state does not take away too much data power and so on. And we can even talk about, and we do talk about, digital constitutionalism, that these kind of constitutional principles will determine the public community spaces as different from the public actors which work on common platforms, as it used to be in the industrial era. Bridges and roads and most electricity lines were public platform, public infrastructure on the top of which private players work. So it's quite possible, it's beginning to happen, and we should be hopeful about it.
Lorenzo, I have a question.
Is it Embert?
Yes, it is.
Embert, if perhaps would it be better, so in the interest of time, because we have two more presentations. Yeah, so maybe let's hold on to it, and we'll get back to it at the end.
No problem.
But thanks for the, please put it in the parking lot. And thanks for Parminder. Those are very good points about, of course, not just giving all the data power to the state, and that's another role for civil society to play as a sort of watchdog. What I'll do now is play the video from our friends in the Philippines, the Computer Professionals Union. I don't know, Nick or the facilitators, if they can please play the video.
Good day, everyone. I'm John Michael Yap, current chair of the Computer Professionals Union from the Philippines, and I'm here to present some key findings and realizations from the implementation of our World Association for Christian Communications funded project, the Philippine Digital Justice Initiative. The project aims to unpack the characteristics, impacts, and ways forward of an increasingly digital world in the Philippine context. To begin with, let me first give a brief backgrounder on the importance of digital justice in the Philippines. The Philippines has long been deemed one of the social media capitals, if not the social media capital of the world, with millions of users and hundreds of content providers via different social media platforms available. In fact, in a study by Statista last Q3 of 2020, Filipino access to the internet is spent mostly on social media, with each Filipino online averaging a little over 4 hours of access a day. Also of note is that a significant number, almost a majority in fact, access the internet through mobile devices. Nonetheless, digital platforms are being promoted and expanded with potential far-reaching impacts across the Philippine economic, social, cultural, and political spheres. This has especially been true with the onslaught of the COVID-19 pandemic, where more and more people relied on digital platforms and services for various needs such as banking, purchases, entertainment, and even public services. Given the ubiquity of digital artifacts and services and how ingrained it is in the Filipinos' lives, the notion of digital justice and bringing awareness to it becomes all the more vital. Through the Philippine Digital Justice Initiative, which commenced September of 2020, we're able to gather inputs and sentiments from the Filipino ICT community, different policy makers and experts, the labor sector, the education sector, and Filipino netizens at large regarding digitalization in the Philippine context from a social justice lens. Through those consultations, coupled by case studies, surveys, and observations, the Philippine Digital Justice Initiative was able to identify the following key digital justice issues relevant to the Philippines: the digital divide, precarious platform-based work, troll armies and fake news, and hijacked democracies. On digital divide, there are still millions left behind without proper internet access due to lack of devices or due to slow internet speeds. In a mid-year 2021 survey conducted by Ookla, the average mobile internet speed in the Philippines is 32.84 Mbps per download and 8.92 Mbps per upload. placing the country 75th out of 139 countries in mobile internet speeds. The country, meanwhile, sat at an average of 66.55 Mbps download and 66.86 Mbps upload for fixed broadband, good for 62nd place out of 180. It's noted that download speeds for both mobile and fixed broadband are way below global averages. In addition to lagging speeds, cost for access is also at a premium. According to the 2021 Inclusive Internet Index study by The Economist, the country ranked 79th out of 120 countries in terms of affordability. Mobile connectivity cost is ranked 71st in the world, with the current average of $0.75 per MB, while fixed broadband access is at a much more expensive range, costing $44 for a monthly 60 Mbps connection, ranking 83rd globally. The country thus has a long way to go in terms of making the internet accessible to all its citizens. App-based services and online freelancing jobs have increased in demand, especially during lockdown, attracting many into the expanding platform-based gig economy that currently employs millions. These jobs, however, do not offer the same job stability and social protections given to workers with employer-employee relationships. The current Philippine Labor Code does not cover informal and gig workers, and no government regulation currently exists to protect them, thereby making them vulnerable to exploitation and abuse. A highlight of this key issue is on the plight of so-called Transport Network Vehicle Services, or TNVS, riders and couriers. TNVS such as Grab, Foodpanda, Lalamove, Angkas, and other similar companies have become important services, especially during the pandemic. Apart from customer-related problems riders encounter, such as fake or scam bookings, uncooperativeness, and unwillingness to provide accurate or complete details about their orders or locations, they also face systemic issues such as lack of benefits and medical assistance, unfair booking systems, and territoriality of applications. Marketing firms cater to politicians rely on cyber troll armies that create multiple fake social media accounts to boost their image and attack opponents. A hallmark example of this is a 2020 Facebook report detailing the takedown of 2 networks of fake accounts, mainly targeting Filipino users. The networks even partly consisted of accounts and pages linked to the military and the police. Some of these accounts were even posting content supporting President Rodrigo Duterte and presidential daughter Sara Duterte's potential run in the 2022 presidential elections. Furthermore, the identified troll networks have engaged in red tagging, malicious and fallacious association of a certain person to communist groups. These troll networks have red tagged Filipino activists, journalists, and even regular netizens if they post things being negative to the administration's image in attempts to silence or cow them. Finally, we've seen how new technologies could be used for state repression, social engineering, and profiteering, leading to hijacked democracies. The Philippines case, a 2018 report showed the private data of some 1.2 million Filipino Facebook users were harvested by Cambridge Analytica. This data was used for Filipino clients of its parent company, SAL Group, who prides itself in social engineering to influence the behavior of groups of people through targeted messaging. Reports showed that the SAL Group, operating through local proxies with clients, such as President Duterte himself and former 2016 vice presidential candidate Ferdinand Bongbong Marcos Jr. Based on these issues, the Philippine Digital Justice Initiative has thus drafted the Filipino People's Digital Justice Declaration as a formal statement of our solidarity and willingness to participate in pursuing and advocating for digital justice. The declaration is rooted on 3 principles based on the identified issues related to digital justice. Firstly, digital infrastructures, services, and artifacts must be democratized and made more accessible to the public. Every Filipino deserves equitable access to affordable, if not free, quality internet services. The state must consider internet connectivity as a public service and therefore regulate it, and that it serves the interests of the Filipino masses. The Philippines must also work towards having its own internet infrastructure. The country must also maximize and mobilize its engineers, scientists, and technologists to design and manufacture its own computing devices which can be used to access the internet. Government must promulgate standards and regulations for digital and online services to ensure data privacy and security, as well as quality of service, and furthermore should develop or enhance its digital and online services. Secondly, information must be free from monopolization and totalitarian control. Filipinos must be able to use and experience various digital public spaces without being actively taken advantage of by any interest groups. A break from foreign dependence in hardware and software will ensure that developing technologies cater to the local demands and needs of Filipinos. Constant and sufficient government support for local research and education in ICT would not only ensure that digital spaces are fit and made for the majority of local consumers, but will also encourage more Filipinos to participate in the digital sphere. Data storage must be decentralized in order to mitigate the risks of any single institution monopolizing data and exposing and compromising the people's data. This must not, however, hinder the efficiency of data management and processing and the services that require it. For internet content to be accessible to everyone, the government must mandate proper translations of local web content into local languages. Digital platforms, while presenting alternatives to their traditional counterparts, must not disenfranchise its users, both laborers and customers. Government institutions must further study the particularities and relations within the system of platform-based work. Data monopoly, such as the one held by Facebook, must be broken, and other parts of the internet must also be made available for free. No single website, service, or application should be favored. Finally, the Declaration also emphasizes that data rights are human rights. To appreciate data rights as human rights, Filipinos must understand that data about us are extensions of our identities. Without such comprehension, people tend to willingly and carelessly give away their data. Every individual has to be cognizant of their right to data privacy as well as their right to choose whom they share their information with. Exercising and protecting this right must not come at the cost of being denied service or worse, harassed. Our laws and policies must protect this right and must not legitimize mass surveillance. Filipinos have the right to be properly informed of and have control over the collection, storage, processing, and transmission of their data. The government must prepare and equip people with the knowledge, tools, and safeguards against possible ill effects of digitalization, automation, artificial intelligence, and other social and technical changes. The government itself must have sufficient understanding and conduct thorough research in order to proactively respond to potential risks Filipinos may be subjected to. These key realizations underscore the importance of continuity in untangling and articulating digitalization and digital justice in the Philippines, and the creation of a Filipino People's Digital Justice Declaration that will serve as a guidepost for future generations of connected and socially conscious Filipinos. Furthermore, these major realizations are what the Philippine Digital Justice Initiative believes to be significant factors to consider towards elevating the people's public perception and appreciation of key concepts involving digital justice. Thank you very much, and good day.
Thank you very much, Jen Michael. Great presentation. Very interesting, the framing that you're using as data as an extension of our identities. I think it's something that is excellent, an excellent way of looking at things. I'll follow the same protocol as for the previous presentation. So for the team member Lynn, maybe just hold that a second before you play the video from Palestine. Does anybody have a question now? I'll take one question for John Michael, who's here live with us. And I don't know if anybody's raised their hand. No, but then in that case, I'll ask a question myself very quickly to you, John Michael. Is, of course, you're pushing for, you're making a lot of demands in a context in the Philippines that is, I would say, probably not that receptive. The government, I would probably think, is not that receptive to your ideas at the moment, but I am sure there's other parties and other political actors that are receptive to this kind of change. What has been your experience so far engaging with policymakers and politicians and people in parliament, for example, to try and move in this direction? Have you had any success?
As of now, there are just a few individuals who are receptive, or at least are willing to listen regarding our calls or our proposals. But not even with the concept of digital justice, but also with other aspects related to digital rights and human rights at that. However, it shouldn't deter us from keeping on pushing for these things, because we know these are important, very important things, and that right now what we're trying to do is we are also trying to reach out with other organizations and individuals and trying to explain to them our our stance, our principles, and our advocacies, in the hope that we could gather enough number so that we could really have that force of number to be able to how do you put it, convince policymakers that this is something that a lot of people are clamoring for.
Thank you, John Michael. Yeah, of course, these are things that take time, the process of building coalitions and so on. It's not something that happens overnight and needs sustained effort. So thanks for that. And now going back to the team in Berlin, when you are free to do it, then please go ahead and play the video from Palestine.
Hello, this is Andali Radwan, Director of Community Media Center in Gaza, Palestine. I would thank WACSI for giving me the opportunity to participate in this significant conference and to give a brief about CMC contribution on enhancing the digital justice among our community. First of all, allow me to introduce the Community Media Center, our organization. It is established and registered in Gaza City by January 2007, aiming at bridging the gap between the people, the marginalized people, and the media means, which was focusing and following only on politicians and politics at that time. So the CMC was established to advocate people's life issues, causes, needs, and shedding the light through media and the new media on their issues, with special emphasis on women and youth, as they are the most marginalized groups in our community. Since 2007, we have cooperated with many different partners at the international level, such like UN agencies and international governmental and non-governmental agencies, and at the local level, such as NGOs, CBOs, and the private sector also. We work to achieve our goal through 3 programs: the Information and Research Program, the Capacity Development Program, and the Advocacy Program. Regarding the topic of the presentation, the digital justice, we could say that the society in Gaza Strip is at war with digital illiteracy. With accelerated development in this field, the community is in mass need of such a topic, and being unaware of this new virtual world drives them to one of both extremes sides, to be overprotective and avoid being a part of this arena, or to be reckless and fall naively in violations, data breach, and cyber exploitation without having sufficient knowledge to safeguard themselves. The digital divide and the inadequacy of digital skills among women is a critical problem that CMC put efforts to limit to avoid its worrisome effects, such as cybercrime, cyber exploitation, and rights violation on social and digital platforms. The Community Media Center is focusing to enhance its work in combating the digital divide and to promote digital literacy by expanding its target groups to include more women, girls, mothers, fathers, students, in order to improve family protection and social stability. As well, we will not stop conducting more capacity building, awareness raising workshops to integrate all the individuals in the society. The stakeholders who share Community Media Center's core goals are the fresh media graduates, females, social and human rights activists, and social media influencers, in addition to CMC team and 25 civil society. We cooperated with them to reach 540 women across the Gaza Strip. During this project, CMC was able to achieve remarkable activities, including developing the capacity of 25 new media graduates by promoting their cognition regarding the women's rights, digital rights in the Palestinian laws and in the international law, forms of digital crimes against women and girls, and the skills of how to secure social media accounts and TOT skills.
أول مرة بسمع عنها اللي هو الأمان الرقمي، الخصوصية الرقمية، كيف نحافظ على هواتفنا، كيف نحمي خصوصيتنا، كيف نحمي الوسائط والملفات الموجودة على جوالاتنا.
Preparing and producing about 500 copies of the guidebook and educational video that explaining the issue of cybercrimes, its forms, and practical steps to make your digital accounts more secure. As well, we successfully conduct 25 awareness-raising workshops over the Gaza Strip, targeted 540 women and young women to raise their awareness regarding cybercrimes and mechanisms of protection and security. And by December 2020, we had launched 3 days awareness-raising digital campaign as a part of the international campaign to combat violence against women, the 16 days campaign on the digital rights, safe and fair use of digital accounts and platforms. Fortunately, efforts have yielded marked progress toward women empowerment in the digital field and equipping them with cognition and skills and improving their performance as trainers and facilitators to be able to transfer their experience and knowledge to their peers in the issues of cybercrimes and privacy protection on digital platforms. It's important to mention that the educational video and the guidebook on digital literacy that have been produced and distributed during all the project activities play a great role in raising public awareness towards digital privacy and the side impact of digital ignorance at the social and family level. CMC is keen to reach all the categories and the individual across the Gaza Strip, regardless of their different social and educational backgrounds. Thus, the guidebook was distributed to all the participants at the awareness-raising workshops, conferences, universities, schools, in addition to NGOs, partners, and co-partners. Moreover, the indicators show noticeable improvement in the awareness among people who have been targeted in the workshops regarding the digital rights and cybercrimes against women and girls and their destructive influence on the community links and family ties.
Thank you very much to the team in Berlin for playing the video. And I believe that we have somebody from CMC in the chat in the Zoom room. Is Khulud here?
Yeah, I'm here. I'm here, Lorenzo. How are you?
Oh, Khulud, nice to hear from you. Go ahead. So as I said, same idea. We have we're lucky enough to have Khulud with us today. Does anybody have any questions for her?
Yeah, okay.
If anybody has questions, please raise your hand. In fact, we do have a question here in the chat. It says, the training of women is very interesting. Are they trained in women groups or in groups of men and women? And what are your experiences? So perhaps this is the first question you can take up, Khulud.
Lorenzo,
yes.
Could you please read again the question, please?
The question is about whether the women who are trained in groups are trained separately from, groups of women only or groups of men and women together?
Yeah, okay. In our project, we targeted female journalists, 25 female journalists from women only, but these women, after they specialized as educators on digital security, also they reach their peers from women and females to educate about the digital security. So in our project, we mainly targeted women.
Perfect. Thanks, Kulu, for the answer. And then perhaps we can go back to Ember Charles, who had a question earlier about for Parminder about the safeguards against acquisition and merger. So perhaps, Ember, you can just go ahead and ask the question.
I think normally when we have set up small systems, deliver services to people, and they rely on the ability to pay, sometimes they may run into some financial problems and leave yourself open being acquired. And in the long run, you find you either develop some kind of oligopolistic system or you go back into a monopoly again. So I'm wondering whether there were any safeguards against that tendency that Parminder could advise us on.
Yeah, again, a very good question. This happens, and probably you know that US is coming up with a set of possible legislations, and one of the legislation is to have certain kind of protections against acquisitions and mergers. But your question was probably with regard to the kind of things I was talking about, and you would be surprised to know that this actually happened, what you were saying, that there were a few small, not small, medium-sized Indian startups which had become the main payment service providers. And then the government came up with this public switch, which can be used by all providers to pay across the system. And it actually happened that Google was able to use this system to suddenly and very quickly become very large. So what happens is that public infrastructure this kind can create these kind of problems. Now that was just an expansion of one party, but it can also be mergers and acquisitions. And then there was a rule made that no single party can have more than 40% of the transactions. And I think it should have been less, maybe 20-25%. So I'm completely in agreement with you that any such system which we are talking about should come with very strong measures against problematic mergers and acquisitions. And in case of the digital, as we know from the WhatsApp acquisition by Facebook, the decision has to be taken very early. We should not wait till certain market size is reached. But from the nature of the businesses itself, we should anticipate what would combine to form oligopolies and monopolies. And therefore, there's a very strong regulator's role here. And new kind of rules and regulations and parameters are required. So basically agreeing with your question, and some attempts in this direction are happening.
Thank you very much, Parminder. And just I had a comment saying that this is for the interpreters. As you know, there's French and Spanish interpretation. So for questions and answers, if people can speak a little bit more slowly, that would be very helpful. It would make things easier for the translators, the interpreters. Any more questions from anybody else? We have about 10 minutes. See if I see any hands up. I mean, because I can keep asking questions myself. Oh, here it is. There's a question from.
Lorenzo,
okay,
there's one in the chat.
Yeah, I'm seeing them now. So perhaps you can go ahead, Reiner, if you would like to go ahead and ask your question, please go ahead.
Well, I hope it works with the acoustics.
Yes.
So my question is, thank you very much. It's a question to all three of them. And I thank you very much for your contribution. And my question is, what can be done internationally and globally to support the good work which happens in India, Philippines, and Palestine? Because since we are a group of international colleagues, it would be good to get some proposals and ideas and wishes from your side. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Okay, I can answer the question.
Go ahead, Khulud.
Okay, thanks for your questions. Very great questions. And under our partnership with WACC, we contact with the India partner with the WACC, and we saw that it's a very valuable partnership with the other to work internationally, and it's a good practice if we do this. And we exchange our experiences in the digital literacy and in the digital security, and to exchange the concepts of the communication and the fair use of the internet, and the products that we also the products about digital rights and digital security that each other is product and issuing. We can exchange these products and we can share the experience with each other. We can make a shared conference about the digital literacy, about the communication, and about the misinformation, disinformation, and the concept of each country of us. Maybe this our idea about that. I hope I answer your question.
Thank you.
If I may take on as also answering the question. I think what you are doing right now is, first of all, a very good thing. I myself heard, I mean, I was following the work my Filipino colleagues were doing, but I wasn't actually fully being able to keep track of that work. And the kind of exchanges which you are doing themselves are very valuable. But also that digital is a very fast moving space, and developing very simple to access common resources of lessons learned and the kind of work happening in one place being shifted or being translated to others is the kind of work which your kind of organizations can do. And I'm quite aware this is the kind of work you actually already do quite well. We work with at least two partners of this conference, WAC and Bread for the World, and they have been making those connections quite well.
Hello. For our part, of course, if you've noticed, a lot of the what they call this, the findings that I've shown you based on the Philippine Digital Justice Initiative are a lot of rudimentary philosophical, right? Principles that would lay the foundation towards the promotion of digital justice in the Philippines. So of course, from an abstract point of view, solidarity from different groups, and getting support in terms of statements or other, tangible forms of solidarity is very much welcome to help us show that, also not only is there a clamor on the local sphere, there's also one from international ones. And the other one, and I know this is going to sound, kind of like materialistic, but I'm just being realistic about it, of course, is some sort of material or financial support to be able to implement some of the programs, right, that can further those calls that are indicated in the Philippine Digital Justice Declaration, particularly in terms of for promotion of digital security, data privacy, that kind of thing. That will require of course, some material needs, right, and financial needs to be able to reach places, and also to come up with materials that would really cater or communicate to some sectors, especially the basic mass sector. Like, for example, how do you really communicate the concept of digital justice to fisher folk, to peasants, to farmers, right? Or even the rural, those who are in the rural poor area, right? In a way that they will appreciate it, right? So there, that's my answer. I hope it's somewhat clear.
Thank you, John Michael. Indeed, we cannot achieve any of this change unless we have the financial resources to do so. And as we all know, we're challenging big corporations with a lot of money. So, of course, it's a very a point well taken, John Michael. I have another question here coming in from Embert. It's also for you, John Michael, and is how is the affordability of the internet calculated in the Philippines?
I see. Okay, so to be fair, what I gave is the it was based on an international study, but just to give context on on how big the how cheap or expensive Philippine connectivity is in the Philippines. The minimum wage here in the Philippines is around 466 pesos as of last check. That's gross. So that's roughly around $9.20. So roughly around that price. And I think if I remember correctly, sorry, that's $9.20 per day, right? So you divide it by 8 hours. That's around a little over $1 per day per hour, right? Now, I think I've mentioned that the internet connectivity, mobile connection is around $0.88 US, if I remember correctly. I can't remember the exact figure, but if you think about it, that's already more than half of an hourly rate per day to get a gigabyte's worth of download here in the Philippines, right? And if you're, for example, you're doing online classes, which is what is being conducted here in the Philippines. Just for everybody's information, we're probably the only country left who has not yet implemented face-to-face, no matter in a limited class. So students are still dependent on internet connectivity for that, right? So for minimum wage earners, that's going to be, of course, really, really painful in terms of the pocket. Of course, this is a different story for lower to middle class. I think they could still afford it, right? But because of the other additional expenses incurred because of the so-called new normal, the way we live through the pandemic, then there are also additional additional expenses that are incurred that makes internet connectivity actually hurt the budget a little bit more. Now, I'm talking about here, a basic cost of internet connectivity. I haven't even gone to the the quality of service being provided by the major internet players here. And let's just say, long and short of it, we're not getting the bang for buck that is that that consumers deserve for the internet connectivity that they're paying for here in the Philippines. So there.
Thank you, John Michael. And I'm sure this would apply to many countries around the world where access to the internet is still quite unaffordable. And that's only for sort of the basic packages. So if you want to go have more reliable broadband internet, it's way more expensive. So thanks for that point. And we're just about to conclude. So I would like to thank John Michael, Parminder, and Khulud for their presence here with us. I also see that our colleague Sally Birch, who's going to be speaking tomorrow about case studies in Latin America, has joined the meeting. Anyway, Sally, nice to see you here. We'll have a chance to talk tomorrow. But for now, I'll pass it back to the moderators in Berlin. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you very much, Lorenzo, for moderating the plenary. And thank you very much, Parminder, Jamichael, and Angelina, for exposing us to the good practices and practical actions that your various organizations are taking in your various contexts, making transparent the successes and the challenges of communication for social justice as far as the digital space and digital cultures are concerned. Dear participants, on this note, we have come to the end of Day1. We have explored the theme of this symposium with a special focus on digital justice today.
We have heard keynote presentations, responses, and comments from the audience. We have worked in small groups and enriched the draft of the manifesto, and now we have learned from some case studies.
But the symposium continues tomorrow with a focus on public space. We therefore would like to invite you to join in again tomorrow.
Now, have a good rest. Perhaps shut down your computers now and be offline, and see you tomorrow. Goodbye.
Thank you. Goodbye.